The silence was the first sign. Before the silent ships and the creeping dread, there was only the perfect, unnerving absence of noise. On Heimdall Station, suspended in the gravitational cradle of the supermassive black hole it was built to study, silence was a constant companion. It was the deep, velvet quiet of the void, a background hum against which the station's own life, the whisper of recycled air, the soft chime of a completed diagnostic, the distant thrum of the graviton stabilizers played out. But this new silence was different. It was an invasive quiet, a stillness that consumed noise and left nothing in its wake. Dr. Aris Thorne felt it in the marrow of his bones, a resonant frequency of absolute zero. He stood before the containment sphere of the Kronos Anomaly Project, a device colloquially and fearfully known as the Echo. The sphere, a 10-meter orb of shimmering, liquid-like energy, did not hum or pulse. It simply was, holding within its core a concept so reality-bending that to even name it felt like a blasphemy against the laws of physics. It held a pocket of manipulated space-time, a wound in causality that, if opened, could unravel the linear progression of the universe. It was his life's work, the culmination of a theory he had once called beautiful. Now, it was a weapon of last resort, and Eris was its reluctant keeper. He ran a hand over his tired face, the graying stubble scratching his palm. Sleep had been a stranger for months. Ever since the first colony, Proxima Centauri B, had gone silent. One moment it was a thriving hub of 5 million souls, its network chattering with commerce, data, and the mundane dramas of human life. The next, it was a ghost signal, a perfectly flat line on the quantum entanglement comms network. No distress call, no radiation spike, no debris, just an end, an intelligence agency. Section 12 had given the phenomenon a name, the stillness. It was an apt descriptor for the creeping existential horror that was methodically erasing humanity from the cosmos. Jian Li, the station security chief and Section 12's unforgiving shepherd, entered the observation chamber, her magnetic boots clicking against the deck with sharp, precise reports that the oppressive quiet seemed to swallow instantly. She was a woman carved from granite and duty, her expression permanently fixed in a state of controlled urgency. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Epsilon Eridani just went dark, she said, her voice clipped, devoid of emotion. The colony on Kepler 186 if. They were broadcasting a system-wide concert, a symphony. It cut out mid-crescendo. Eris felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Kepler 186. He squeezed his eyes shut, but the image was already there. Seared onto the back of his eyelids, his daughter, Lena, her face alight with the thrill of discovery, framed by the soft, ambient glow of her lab on that very world. It was from there, a year ago, that she had made the call that changed everything. The call that had birthed the terrible potential housed in the sphere before him. "They're getting faster," Eris murmured, his voice hoarse. He turned to face Jian, his gaze falling on the sidearm holstered at her hip. It seemed like such a quaint, primitive thing in the face of their enemy. You couldn't shoot a concept. You couldn't bomb an ontological plague. The simulations from Section 12 suggest an exponential advance, Jian stated, confirming his fear. At this rate, the Sol system will be within its projected path in less than a standard year. She took a step closer, her dark eyes fixed on the shimmering containment field. Is it ready? The question was a loaded gun, and it was pointed directly at his conscience. Aris thought of the conversations, the heated arguments that had raged in this very room for weeks. He thought of Ilara Vance, the station's lead ethicist and Lena's former mentor, who argued that unleashing the Echo was a form of suicide, a surrender to chaos that was no better than the sterile order the stillness sought to impose. To use it was not to win, but to redraw the rules of existence so fundamentally that the concept of winning became meaningless. "It's been ready since we stabilized the core," Eris answered, his voice flat. "Readiness isn't the issue. Then what is?" Jian's patience was a finite resource, and it was clearly dwindling. "Eris, we are watching our species be erased from existence, star by star. We are facing an enemy that doesn't negotiate, that doesn't have a goal we can comprehend beyond our own cessation. We don't have the luxury of philosophical debate." Her gaze was relentless. "Section 12 is prepared to assume control of the project if you are unwilling to activate it." It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, a procedural eventuality. He was the key, the only one who truly understood the deep mathematics, the architect of the machine. But in the end, he was just a man, and the apparatus of survival would grind him down if he stood in its way. He remembered that final call from Lena. She hadn't been on Kepler 186F for a planetary concert. She was there calibrating a new array of deep space quantum sensors, using the planet's unique orbital resonance to filter for background universal noise. She had called him not as a daughter to a father, but as one scientist to another, her voice trembling with a fervor he hadn't heard since she was a child discovering the elegant beauty of calculus. "Dad, you were right," she had said, her holographic image flickering across the light years, her eyes wide with a terrifying, brilliant light. "It's not just background radiation from the Big Bang. There's something else woven into space-time itself, a pattern, a resonance. It's like the universe has a memory, a ghost of every quantum decision ever made. We can hear it. We can hear the echo of what could have been." That was the breakthrough, not a weapon, but a revelation. The universe wasn't a single, immutable timeline. It was a symphony of potential, and Lena had found a way to read the sheet music. His work, her discovery, and Section 12's desperation had twisted that beautiful, profound idea into this engine of chaos. The echo didn't destroy. It didn't kill. It did something infinitely more terrifying. It would target the source of the stillness and project a quantum state of infinite superposition backward to the moment of its inception. It wouldn't erase it. It would force it to experience every possible reality simultaneously. It would drown order in an infinite ocean of chaos, a tidal wave of every path taken and not taken, every choice made and unmade, a storm of probability that would not just destroy the enemy but would ripple outward, fracturing the very foundation of cause and effect for the entire galaxy. "The issue, Jian," Eris said, finally meeting her gaze, his own eyes feeling ancient, "is that we don't know what comes after. We stop the stillness by breaking the universe. What if the pieces don't fit back together? What if we save ourselves from being silenced only to find ourselves screaming in a billion different realities at once, with no way back to the one we knew?" He gestured around the sterile chamber, at the blinking lights, the cold metal, the silent, shimmering orb. "This was supposed to be a place of discovery. We were meant to listen to the stars, not shout them into madness." Jian's expression didn't soften. "Lena was on Kepler 186, she said, her voice now dangerously quiet, a stiletto sliding between his ribs. "She was a part of this project. She understood the stakes. Don't you think she would want us to use her discovery to save the people she loved?" The blow landed exactly as she'd intended. The memory of Lena's laugh, a bright, chiming sound, echoed in the silent chamber of his mind. He saw her as a little girl, perched on his lap, pointing at star charts and asking questions he, with all his knowledge, couldn't answer. He had promised to find the answers with her. Now, she was a ghost on a dead world, and he was the custodian of her terrible, magnificent legacy. A soft chime broke the tension, a priority alert. On the main console, a message thread from Ilara Vance blinked. It read, "Aris, you need to see this. The latest simulation." Jian glanced at the console, then back at Eris. "Go," she said. "Talk to the philosopher. But understand this, Doctor, the clock is ticking. And when the time comes, if you can't make the choice, I will." Eris turned away from the echo, the shimmering sphere seeming to watch him with a silent, cosmic intelligence. As he walked toward the door, he felt the weight of his daughter's discovery, the burden of a choice that no single human should ever have to make. He was caught between two apocalypses, the perfect, silent order of the stillness, and the screaming, infinite chaos of his own making. The symphony on Kepler 186F had ended mid-crescendo. His was just beginning. He found Ilara in the station's primary simulation suite, a holographic chamber known as the Orrery. It was usually a place of wonder, where they could walk among swirling galaxies and nascent star systems. Tonight, it was a chamber of horrors. Ilara Vance stood in the center of the room, her slight frame silhouetted against a swirling vortex of fractured realities. She was older than Eris, with a calm, scholarly demeanor that was now frayed at the edges, her face pale in the chaotic light. She didn't turn as he entered. "I ran the projection again," she said, her voice heavy with dread. "I adjusted the parameters to account for the accelerated advance of the stillness. I hoped it would make a difference, that it would show us a clean outcome, a victory." The simulation swirled around them. It was a visual representation of the echo's activation. At first, there was a single point of brilliant white light, the theoretical source of the stillness. Then, a wave of iridescent energy. The echo washed over it. The white light didn't vanish. It shattered. It exploded into an infinite web of branching, multicolored threads, each a different timeline, a different possibility. The web expanded at an impossible speed, a cancer of causality. Galaxies around them flickered, shifting through different versions of themselves. A star would go supernova in one timeline, while in another, it would collapse into a black hole. Planets would form and crumble in the blink of an eye. "It's worse than we thought," Ilara whispered, gesturing to the maelstrom. "The causal fracture isn't contained. The feedback loop doesn't just neutralize the stillness. It destabilizes the local cosmic fabric. Our own solar system, it becomes a quantum foam. Every possibility, from the mundane to the catastrophic, happens at once." She turned to him then, her eyes pleading. "Imagine it, Aris. Every decision you ever made, branching into a new reality you are forced to witness. The coffee cup you chose to pick up, and the one you didn't. The loved one who dies in a transport accident, and the one who lives. Both realities existing in the same space, overlapping, screaming for dominance. It's not survival. It's an eternity in a hall of mirrors, with every reflection being real." Eris watched the simulation of Earth. He saw it pristine and blue, and in the same instant, he saw it as a cinder, its oceans boiled away by a premature solar flare. He saw humanity reach for the stars, and he saw it consumed by a self-inflicted nuclear holocaust. All possibilities, all at once, an eternal, inescapable purgatory of what-ifs. "Jian calls it a weapon," Ilara continued, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and despair. A weapon is precise. It has a target. This is cosmic vandalism. We would be no better than the stillness. It imposes a singular deictic reality. We would impose an infinite, chaotic one. Order versus chaos. Both are tyrannies. Both are anathema to life. Which requires a stable, linear framework in which to exist and make meaningful choices. Her logic was impeccable. Her argument, a perfect cage of ethics and reason. But reason felt like a flimsy shield against the inexorable advance of that perfect, all-consuming silence. "What is your alternative?" Alara, Eris asked, the words feeling like dust in his mouth. "Do we sit here and politely debate the philosophical nuances of our own extinction? Do we let humanity become another silent monument in a cosmic museum curated by an entity we can't even comprehend? We keep looking for another way," she insisted, stepping out of the hologram, its light casting dancing shadows across her face. Lena's discovery was about understanding the universe, not breaking it. There might be another application, a way to create a shield, to hide, to communicate something other than this universal murder-suicide pact. "There isn't time," Eris shot back, his own desperation finally cracking through his weary composure. "You've seen the projections. Kepler 186F was one of our most distant colonies. The next will be closer, and the one after that. Do you want to be having this conversation when the silence falls over Mars, when it's lapping at the shores of Earth?" He stepped into the simulation, letting the ghost realities wash over him. He felt a profound, aching connection to the chaos. It was messy, unpredictable, and terrifying. It was life. The stillness offered only a perfect, sterile death. In that moment, he felt a flicker of what Lena must have felt, not just the terror, but the awe, the power to not just see all the paths, but to unleash them. It was the power of a god, and it was resting in the hands of a grieving father who just wanted the silence to go away. A klaxon suddenly blared through the station, a jarring, physical intrusion into their ethereal debate. It was a sound reserved for only the most severe emergencies. A red light pulsed on a nearby console. Proximity alert. "That's impossible," Alara breathed. "The nearest charted vessel is weeks away." Aris strode to the console, his heart hammering against his ribs. He brought up the external sensor logs. There was nothing on optical or thermal scans. Nothing on LiDAR. But the station's most sensitive instrument, the quantum gravity imager, the very device Lena had helped design, was screaming. It was detecting a localized distortion in space-time, a wave of immense gravitational pressure that was flattening the quantum foam, smoothing out the probabilistic nature of reality. It was a wave of pure, absolute certainty. It wasn't a ship. It was a presence. It was here. "Gian," Eris said into his comms unit, his voice tight. "Report." Gian's voice came back instantly, strained, tense. "I see it. Eris. All non-essential personnel are in lockdown. The field is right outside. It's just sitting there." Eris brought up the forward viewport feed on the main screen of the orrery. Outside, against the backdrop of the swirling accretion disk of the black hole, there was nothing. Just empty space. But he could feel it. The silence wasn't just on the comms anymore. It was pressing against the hull of the station. It was a pressure building in his ears, in his mind. The subtle background hum of the station's life support systems seemed to be fading, thinning out, as if the very concept of sound was being gently, inexorably erased. The stillness had stopped its advance across the stars. It had found the source of the noise it had been hunting. It had found them. It had found the echo. In the center of the orrery, the simulation of their fractured future still played out its chaotic dance. Alara looked from the viewport to the swirling hologram, her face a mask of utter horror. The choice was no longer a philosophical exercise about a distant future. It was here, now. A silent god was at their door, and inside, a button was waiting to be pushed, promising a salvation that looked just like damnation. Eris looked at the terrified face of his friend, then at the empty space outside that promised a perfect final peace. The time for debate was over. The time for an impossible choice had arrived. The silence was a physical weight, pressing in on the station from all sides. It wasn't merely the absence of sound. It was the active, methodical suppression of energy. The lights on the orrery console flickered, not with the chaotic rhythm of a power surge, but with a strange, lazy reluctance, as if the photons themselves were finding it difficult to muster the enthusiasm for travel. The air grew cold and still, the intricate dance of molecules slowing to a crawl. On the main screen, the view of the black hole's accretion disk, usually a vibrant, violent swirl of superheated matter, was losing its definition, its chaotic edges smoothing out into a perfect placid ring. The stillness wasn't just erasing things, it was imposing a dreadful cosmic tidiness. It was collapsing the messy and beautiful probabilities of the quantum world into a single, immutable, and silent fact. Eris, what is it doing? Alara's voice was a strained whisper, a tiny flicker of defiance against the encroaching quiet. He could see the terror in her eyes, but also a dawning, horrified understanding. This was the antithesis of everything she believed in, the ultimate violation of the universe's vibrant complexity. It's collapsing wave functions, Eris said, his own voice sounding distant, detached, as he analyzed the data streaming from the quantum gravity imager on a macro scale. It's not attacking us with weapons. It's simplifying us. It's turning possibility into certainty. The comm unit crackled, Jian Li's voice cutting through the oppressive hush, tinny and strained. Thorn, get to the containment chamber. That's an order. The field is intensifying. It's damping the station's graviton stabilizers. The core containment for the singularity is fluctuating. If it rewrites physics enough to make our systems impossible, we don't just go silent. We cease to exist in a flash of gamma rays. She was right. Heimdall Station was a delicate balancing act, its existence predicated on the very laws of physics the entity outside was calmly rewriting. Eris turned to Alara. Stay here. Lock down the orrery. If I don't make it back, the fail-safes. Alara shook her head, a defiant spark in her eyes. No, I'm coming with you. If you're going to break the universe, you're going to do it with your conscience standing right beside you. There was no time to argue. They ran. The corridors of Heimdall Station, usually bustling with the quiet purpose of scientists and engineers, were eerily still. Crew members stood frozen at their posts, staring at blank screens, their faces pale masks of confusion. It wasn't panic. It was a deeper, more insidious shutdown, as if the very capacity for decisive action was being leached from their minds. The station's automated voice, a calm, reassuring presence that usually announced shift changes and minor system alerts, was gone. The silence was absolute, broken only by the frantic pounding of their own hearts and the magnetic clamp of their boots on the deck. They reached the junction leading to the central core and found their path blocked by two of Jian's security officers, their faces grim behind their helmets, rifles held at a low ready. Jian herself stood just beyond them, her back to the massive, shielded door of the Echo's containment chamber. She held a data pad in one hand, her knuckles white. "It's worse than I thought," she said, her voice a low growl that barely disturbed the air. "It's not just the stabilizers, it's affecting our quantum comms network. The link to Section 12 headquarters on Titan is thinning. The entanglement is degrading. It's isolating us, cutting us off from everything." She looked past Eris to Alara, her gaze like ice. "He doesn't need a conscience right now, Doctor. He needs a resolution." "And this is your resolution," Alara challenged, stepping forward, her voice ringing with a sudden, fierce strength in the dead air. "To unleash a storm of chaos that will make this silence seem like a blessing. Don't you see what's happening? It felt the echo. It felt the potential for this ontological weapon. It didn't come here to destroy us. It came here to stop us, to prevent us from committing an atrocity against the very fabric of reality. An atrocity." Jian laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that was immediately swallowed by the quiet. "Look around you, Alara. We are dying a slow, quiet, orderly death. Billions of human beings have been simplified out of existence. I will take an eternity of screaming chaos over one more second of this perfect, sterile peace. At least the screaming is the sound of life." Jian turned her unforgiving eyes to Eris. "The choice is simple. Their order or our chaos. His finger or mine. The activation sequence is complex, but my engineers are creative. They'll get through it eventually. It will just be messier. Activate it. Eris. For Lena. For everyone on Kepler 186 if. End this." The name hung in the air. Lena. His daughter. The brilliant, laughing girl who had looked at the universe and seen not just stars and equations, but a grand, beautiful, unfinished poem. What would she have wanted? Would she have chosen this terrible, beautiful chaos, or would she have sought another way? A third path they were too blind with fear to see. Eris pushed past the guards, his movements feeling slow, syrupy, as if he were moving through water. He approached the chamber door, placing his palm on the biometric scanner. The panel remained dark. The system was dead. "It's too late," Alara breathed, a note of desperate hope in her voice. "The station is shutting down." "No," Jian said, her voice grim. "It's just cut off from the central command. The chamber has its own independent power source. Manual override." She gestured with her head, and one of the guards stepped forward, producing a plasma torch. "We're getting through that door. Eris, one way or another." "That won't be necessary," Eris said quietly. He reached into his coat, his fingers closing around a small, cold object. It was a key, but not a physical one. It was a quantum entanglement key, a small device he and Lena had designed, linked to the core systems of the Echo, a dead man's switch, a final, personal failsafe. He held it up. "Lena and I built a back door for a situation just like this." He looked at Alara, his heart aching with the weight of her argument. She was right. This was madness. It was an act of cosmic arrogance. But as the silence pressed in, as he felt the very laws that governed his existence beginning to fray and simplify, he realized another, deeper truth. The stillness wasn't just killing them. It was erasing the idea that they had ever mattered. It was taking away their stories, their songs, their mistakes, their triumphs, and replacing them with a single blank page. Life wasn't about finding the right answer. It was about the messy, glorious, often painful process of asking the questions. The stillness was the final, inarguable answer. The echo was infinite questions. Lena didn't see it as a weapon, Eris said, as his voice finding a new strength, a clarity born of absolute desperation. Not really. She saw it as a conversation. The stillness is a monologue, a single, unchanging declaration that only one state of being is correct. The echo is the rebuttal. It's every voice, every possibility, every maybe and what if, all speaking at once. It's not a weapon to cause chaos. It's a defense mechanism to preserve it. He met Ilara's pleading eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Then he turned to Jian. "Open the door." Jian nodded to the guard, who stepped back. Eris inserted the quantum key into a hidden port beside the biometric scanner, with a low groan of protesting metal and a hiss of equalizing pressure. The massive, shielded door slid open. The chamber beyond was dark, the oppressive silence within it even more profound. But in the center, the containment sphere of the echo pulsed with a soft, internal light, a single, defiant heartbeat in a dying universe. It was waiting. Aris stepped across the threshold, Ilara and Jian following close behind. The air inside was freezing, charged with a strange, static energy that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. He walked to the primary console, a simple pedestal that rose from the floor before the shimmering sphere. The screen was dark, but it flickered to life as he approached, recognizing the key in his hand. The activation sequence appeared. It was elegant in its terrifying simplicity. A series of quantum state verifications, a final calibration of the target, the space-time coordinates of the entity just outside their hull, and a single, final command prompt. A choice, a yes or a no, written in the universal language of binary. "Eris, please," Ilara begged, her hand resting on his arm. Her touch was warm, a small point of human connection in the vast, cold emptiness of the decision. "There is still time. We can still think." "No," Jian said from the doorway. "There isn't." On the console, a new data stream appeared. It was the feed from the quantum gravity imager. The wave of certainty was accelerating its collapse. The black hole's event horizon was now a perfect featureless sphere. The chaos of Hawking radiation had ceased entirely. The station's structural integrity alarms began to chime, a weak, pathetic sound that was almost instantly snuffed out by the silence. The very metal of the station was groaning, its probabilistic atomic structure being forced into a rigid, crystalline state that was not designed to handle the stresses of its orbit. They had seconds. Eris looked at the sphere. He saw his daughter's face reflected in its shimmering surface, her eyes full of that brilliant, terrifying light. He was not choosing chaos over order. He was choosing Lena's universe over theirs. He was choosing the universe of infinite, beautiful, terrible questions over the peace of a single, final answer. His fingers moved over the console, the holographic keys cool beneath his touch. He initiated the sequence. The soft light within the sphere vanished. It became a perfect black, a void that seemed to drink the very light from the room. It was no longer holding a pocket of space-time. It was holding a pocket of pure, unadulterated potential. The hum of the station died completely. The emergency lights failed. For a single, eternal moment, There was nothing but the absolute dark and the absolute silence. Then, a sound. Not a loud sound. A soft, single note, like a tuning fork struck in a cathedral. It emanated from the sphere, a note of pure possibility that pushed back against the crushing silence. The silence resisted. Eris felt a pressure in his skull, an unimaginable force pressing in on his consciousness, demanding that he stop, that he submit, that he be simplified. He closed his eyes and thought of Lena's laugh. The single note held, then grew, branching into a chord, then a symphony of infinite, cascading harmonies. A tremor ran through the deck, a stutter in the fabric of the station. Eris opened his eyes. Standing next to Alara, for a ghost of a second, was another Alara, her face streaked with grime, a strange, archaic-looking rifle slung over her shoulder. Jian flickered, and for an instant she was older, her hair gray, a look of profound peace on her face. The chamber around them warped, the walls seeming to stretch and bend. The echo was awake. It was singing its song of infinite possibilities, and the universe, and for the first time, was being forced to listen to every word. The great silence had been broken, and now the true chaos would begin. The first moment after the silence broke was not a cacophony, but a schism. Reality did not simply become chaotic. It tore along invisible seams, stuttering like a corrupted data file. Inside the containment chamber, the three of them were thrown to the deck, not by an explosion, but by a violent lurch in the very concept of down. For a half-second, gravity was a lateral force, trying to smear them against the far wall. The next, it vanished entirely, leaving them floating in the absolute, echoing darkness that had swallowed the sphere. Eris's stomach heaved, his inner ear screaming in protest at the violation of fundamental laws. He flailed in the void, his hand brushing against Alara's, and he held on. The simple, solid contact, a desperate anchor in a sea of unraveling physics. The symphony of infinite possibilities that had bloomed from the echo was not a gentle overture. It was a physical assault. Whispers filled his mind, ghosts of conversations he'd never had, warnings from people he'd never met. He saw a flash of Lena, not as she was, but older, her face etched with lines of sorrow, mouthing a single, silent word, "Don't." The image was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by the shrieking of 1,000 different station alarms from 1,000 different potential disasters, all happening at once. The emergency lights flickered back on, but they were no longer a steady, reliable red. They strobed through a nauseating spectrum of impossible colors, casting shadows that moved with a life of their own, twisting into shapes that seemed to follow them, to watch them. Jian was the first to recover. Her military discipline was a bulwark against the ontological shock, while Eris and Ilara were still reeling from the sensory and cognitive deluge. She had already planted her magnetic boots to the deck as gravity reasserted itself with a bone-jarring thud. "Report!" she barked, her voice a solid, commanding thing in the swirling madness. "Thorn, what is this? What did you do?" Eris pushed himself up, his head throbbing. The chamber was no longer a stable, geometric space. The far wall seemed to ripple, to breathe. A section of the floor momentarily became transparent, revealing a dizzying view of the black hole below. Except it wasn't their black hole. It was orbited by a ring of crystalline structures that pulsed with a cold, blue light. "I didn't do anything but what we planned," he gasped, fighting for breath. "This is it. This is the causal fracture. It's propagating." He looked at his own hands. For a terrifying instant, they were the gnarled, liver-spotted hands of an old man. He blinked, And they were his own again. The echo is projecting a state of infinite superposition. We're not just observing it. We're in it. We're experiencing every probability at once. Ilara had crawled to the nearest console, her face pale but her eyes burning with a feverish, scientific intensity. "It's not random," she said, her fingers flying across a holographic interface that was flickering between Terran Standard and a set of intricate, alien glyphs. "There's a wave pattern. The chaos is emanating from the sphere, but it's interacting with the remnants of the stillness. It's not a clean break. It's a war." She pointed to the doorway. Outside, the corridor they had just run through was a terrifying tableau. One moment it was the sterile, metallic hallway of Heimdall Station. The next, it was overgrown with thick, phosphorescent vines. The next, it was a chasm of empty space. And in between the flickers, they saw pockets of perfect, unblemished stillness, sections of the corridor that were utterly normal, utterly silent, like islands of solid certainty in a sea of quantum insanity. These pockets were growing and shrinking, fighting a territorial battle against the chaos. The stillness wasn't gone. It was fighting back. "We have to get to the orrery," Eris said, grabbing a support strut as the station groaned, the sound itself seeming to split into a dozen different dissonant echoes. "It's the only place with the sensory suite to map what's happening on a macro scale. We're blind in here." Gian nodded, her face a mask of grim determination. She unholstered her sidearm, then seemed to realize its utter futility and clipped it back into place. "My officers are out there. We have to secure the station." "There is no station to secure," Ilara cried, her voice rising with a note of hysteria. "There are a million potential stations. We need to find a way to anchor ourselves, to navigate this." As if on cue, one of Gian's security officers appeared at the doorway, or rather, several versions of him appeared, flickering in and out of phase. One was screaming, his faceplate cracked. Another stood calmly, rifle raised. A third was a charred skeleton. They all converged into a single and trembling figure who took a stumbling step into the chamber. "Chief, I can hear my own thoughts. All of them." He trailed off, his eyes wide with horror. He looked down at his own hands, which were phasing in and out of existence. "Make it stop," he pleaded, his voice dissolving into a chorus of whispers. He then took a step toward one of the pockets of absolute stillness that had momentarily appeared in the corridor behind him. As his foot crossed the threshold, the flickering stopped. The whisper ceased. He became a single, solid, unwavering image of a man. And then he simply ceased. He didn't die or explode. He was just gone, erased from existence with the quiet, efficient simplicity of a deleted file. The pocket of stillness he had stepped into expanded slightly, a tiny victory for order in the war against chaos. "It's simplifying them," Eris breathed, a cold dread washing over him. The stillness, it's offering an escape, a way out of the chaos. All you have to do is surrender your potential, cease to be anything other than a single and simple fact, and then you're gone. Gian stared at the empty space where her subordinate had been, her jaw tight with fury. "So, we're trapped," she snarled, "between a reality that will drive us insane and one that will erase us entirely." "No," Eris said, a desperate idea forming in his mind. He looked at the quantum key still clutched in his hand. It wasn't flickering. It felt solid, real. Anchors. Ilara was right. "We need anchors, things with a low quantum variance." Simple, definite objects. Or ideas. He thought of Lena, his love for her, his grief. Those feelings weren't flickering. They were constant, a solid bedrock in the shifting sands of his own consciousness. Focus, he commanded, his voice gaining an authority he didn't feel. Both of you. Focus on something real, a memory, a person, something that doesn't change. He focused on the image of Lena as a child, on his knee, tracing the constellations. Alara closed her eyes, her lips moving in a silent recitation, perhaps an old philosophical axiom, a single, clear thought. Jian's face hardened, her expression locking onto what Eris could only guess was a memory of pure, unyielding duty. The chaotic flickering around them seemed to lessen, to recede slightly from their immediate personal space. They were creating their own tiny bubbles of coherent reality through sheer force of will. It's working, Alara whispered, opening her eyes. We're stabilizing ourselves. Good, Jian said, her voice clipped. Now let's move. And the journey to the orrery was a nightmare trek through a schizophrenic landscape. They moved in a tight formation, their concentration a fragile shield against the storm. Corridors rearranged themselves mid-step. A maintenance bay they entered flickered, and for a terrifying minute, they were floating in the middle of a stellar nursery, surrounded by the brilliant, silent fire of newborn stars. They saw crew members caught in temporal loops, endlessly repeating a single gesture or phrase. They saw others who had succumbed to the chaos, their bodies warping into impossible geometries, their screams echoing from multiple timelines at once. And everywhere, they saw the creeping, insidious pockets of the stillness, the zones of certainty, as Alara called them, offering their silent, deadly promise of peace. They finally reached the orrery, its great circular doors flickering like a dying candle. Inside, the chamber was a maelstrom of light and data. The central holographic projector was no longer displaying a simulation. It was now a live, terrifyingly real map of their new existence. The galaxy swirled before them, a tapestry woven from a billion shimmering, conflicting threads of reality. And across that tapestry, two forces were at war. From the point where Heimdall Station hung, a wave of iridescent, chaotic energy, the echo was propagating outwards, shattering the cosmos into an infinite fractal of possibilities. But from the cold, dark spaces between the galaxies, a creeping, crystalline lattice of pure white light, the stillness was advancing patiently, inexorably simplifying the chaos, turning entire star systems into single, silent data points. It was a war on a cosmic scale, a battle for the soul of the universe between infinite potential and absolute certainty. Alara moved toward the primary console, her face a mixture of terror and awe. Look, she breathed, pointing toward the Sol system. It was a raging storm of conflicting timelines, a place of supreme chaos. But in the center of it, on the third planet, something was different. Earth, Eris whispered. Unlike the rest of the system, Earth was not just a chaotic blur. It was resolving. The conflicting timelines were not just coexisting. They seemed to be converging, weaving themselves together into a new, complex but stable pattern. It was a tapestry, not a tangle. What's happening? Jian asked, her soldier's mind struggling to find a pattern in the divine madness. Eris stepped closer, his eyes scanning the data streams that flowed from the heart of the storm. He saw quantum signatures he recognized, mathematical constants that were not native to their universe, but were fundamental to the architecture of the Echo. He felt a chill run down his spine, a sudden, impossible realization that changed everything. "It's Lena," he whispered, his voice trembling. "The Echo isn't just a chaos engine. It's a reality loom. And it's using a template to weave a new pattern. It's using her memories, her consciousness, her final thoughts, imprinted on the system when she made her discovery." He looked at his friends, his face pale with the terrifying magnitude of his discovery. "We didn't just break the universe," he said. "We gave my daughter the power to remake it." The revelation hung in the air of the orrery, heavier and more reality-bending than the gravitational pull of the black hole outside. Lena, his daughter, wasn't just the inspiration for the Echo. She was its architect. Her consciousness, the ghost in the machine, the weaver at the heart of the great cosmic loom, the chaotic, swirling representation of the soul system on the holographic display seemed to take on a new, personal significance. It wasn't just a storm of conflicting timelines. It was a mind at work, a personality expressing itself on a scale that dwarfed comprehension. "That's impossible," Jian breathed, her usual stoicism finally cracking, revealing the bewildered soldier beneath. "Her consciousness, how she's dead." "Is she?" Alara countered, her voice soft but electric with intellectual fervor. She gestured at the swirling vortex of light that was their home system. "What is death in a universe where every possibility is happening at once? The stillness may have erased her from our linear timeline, but the Echo has resurrected her in every other. It's using her quantum signature, the unique pattern of her neural network that was captured in that final data transmission from Kepler 186f, as its foundational code." She looked at Eris, her eyes filled with a terrifying, brilliant understanding. "Eris, when Lena made her discovery, she didn't just find a pattern in space-time. She became one. Her mind, in that moment of breakthrough, became entangled with the universal background resonance she was observing. The Echo didn't just use her data. It is her." The thought was a paradox of grief and wonder. His daughter was gone, yet she was everywhere. She was dead, yet she was a nascent god, painting a new cosmos with the palette of her own memories and imagination. Eris stumbled closer to the holographic display, his hand outstretched as if he could touch the swirling nebula of Earth's potential. He saw glimpses within the storm, fleeting images that were achingly familiar. The gentle curve of the coast where he had taken her as a child, the towering spires of the university where she had first challenged his theories, the soft, ambient glow of her lab on Kepler 186f. These weren't just random possibilities. They were her memories, her favorite places, the things she had loved, being woven into the fabric of a new reality. "She's not just remaking it," Eris murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "She's trying to save it. Look." He pointed to the edge of the soul system. The iridescent wave of chaos from the Echo was not propagating mindlessly. Here, at its source, it was forming a complex, layered barrier, a shimmering wall of structured probability, and against that wall, the crystalline lattice of the stillness was breaking, shattering like glass. "It's a shield," Jian said, her tactical mind immediately grasping the implication. "She's using the chaos to create a defense." "More than that," Alara corrected, her analysis of the data streams growing more confident. "It's a filter. The chaotic, destructive timelines are being directed outward, forming the shield. The stable, life-affirming possibilities are being drawn inward, woven into the new Earth. She's not just protecting us, she's curating us, choosing the best of all possible worlds. It was a beautiful, terrifying thought. His daughter, his brilliant, kind, stubborn daughter, was sifting through the infinite sand of probability to find the grains of hope, of life, of a future worth living. But even as a surge of paternal pride and love washed over him, a colder, more pragmatic question arose, voiced by Jian. "How long can she keep it up?" she asked, her gaze fixed on the cosmic battlefield displayed before them. "She may be the architect of Amezi, but she's fighting an enemy that is the very embodiment of universal law. That thing out there is patient. It doesn't get tired. It just is." What happens when she makes a mistake? What happens when the strain of holding a billion realities in her mind becomes too much? As if in answer, a violent tremor shook the station, far more severe than anything they had experienced before. The holographic display flickered wildly. In the swirling vortex of the Sol system, a dark spot appeared, a bloom of pure, featureless black that began to expand like an ink blot. A zone of certainty. Alara gasped. "It's broken through the shield!" On the display, the crystalline lattice of the stillness had focused its assault, concentrating an immense wave of simplifying energy on a single point in the quantum barrier. The shield of chaos had buckled, and a sliver of pure, absolute order had pierced through, striking at the heart of Lena's creation. They could feel the ripple effect even on Heimdall Station. A section of the orrery ceiling flickered, and for a moment was replaced by a perfect, silent void of empty space. The consoles beside Jian went dark, their complex functions simplified into inert blocks of metal. The stillness was invading their sanctuary. "She's fighting it," Eris said, watching the display with a desperate intensity. The threads of probability around the dark spot were swirling, converging, trying to overwhelm the zone of certainty with an influx of new possibilities, to smother its singular nature in a blanket of infinite alternatives. But the spot was holding. It was an anchor of absolute reality in a sea of maybe. "She's losing," Jian stated, her voice flat. "The concentration required, it's too much. She can't fight a war on a cosmic scale and defend against a targeted strike at the same time." "Then we have to help her," Eris declared, his mind racing. "How?" Jian demanded. "We're ghosts here. We're just passengers in her storm." "No, we're not," Eris shot back, turning to the master console of the orrery. "The echo originated here. Its core programming, the deep mathematics that govern its function, are still accessible from this station. We can't control the storm, but maybe we can talk to the storm." He began to work, his fingers flying across the interface, which was now a maddening fusion of human and otherworldly code. "Alara, I need you to find a stable communication frequency, not quantum entanglement. Something simpler, more fundamental. A carrier wave based on a universal constant, pi. The golden ratio. Something that will remain true across multiple realities." "Jian," he continued, not looking up from his frantic work, "I need you to protect this room. The station's internal structure is becoming a battlefield. The stillness is trying to simplify its way to this chamber. It knows this is the source. Hold it off. Buy us time." Jian didn't hesitate. She drew her sidearm, the gesture no longer futile, but an act of pure defiance. "Consider it done," she said, her voice ringing with renewed purpose. She moved to the flickering doorway, her boots clamping to the deck. a lone soldier standing guard at the edge of infinity. Elara, meanwhile, was already deep in the orrery systems, her face illuminated by cascading equations. "I think I have something," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "A resonance based on the fine structure constant. It's faint, but it seems to be consistent across all the timelines we're currently observing." "Patch it through," Eris commanded. "I'm going to try to send a signal, not a message in words. She's beyond that now. I'm going to send her an anchor, a memory, the simplest, most stable one I have." He closed his eyes, ignoring the chaos of the room, the groaning of the station, the encroaching threat of the stillness. He pushed it all away and focused on a single moment in time, a memory he had replayed 1,000,000 times since her death. Lena, age 7, on his shoulders. They were in the old Griffith Observatory, looking up at the Foucault pendulum as it swung in its slow, majestic arc, a perfect, elegant demonstration of the Earth's rotation. She had been silent for a long time, her small hands clutching his hair. Then she had whispered in his ear, her voice full of a child's profound, simple wisdom. "It doesn't just show we're moving, Daddy. It shows we're all moving together." It was a memory of perfect connection, of a shared, stable reality, a moment of simple, undeniable truth. He poured all his love, all his grief, all his pride into that single memory and, using the interface Elara had configured, he pushed it out into the storm. On the holographic display, a thin, golden thread of light shot from their position at Heimdall Station and streaked across the fractured cosmos, plunging into the heart of the raging vortex of the Sol system. For a moment, nothing happened. The dark spot of the stillness continued to grow. The station shuddered, a piece of the ceiling detaching and dissolving into a shower of mathematical symbols before it could hit the floor. Jian fired her weapon into the corridor, the plasma bolt striking a creeping patch of crystalline white light and shattering it, only for it to begin reforming moments later. "Eris, it's not working," Elara cried, but Eris kept his eyes closed, his mind locked on the memory, on the feeling of his daughter's small hands, on her voice in his ear. We're all moving together. Then, on the display, the golden thread pulsed. The vortex of the Sol system seemed to respond. The swirling chaos around the dark spot began to change, to organize. It stopped being a frantic, desperate defense and became a focused, intelligent one. The threads of probability began to weave themselves into a complex, interlocking pattern around the zone of certainty, not just blocking it, but analyzing it, deconstructing it, finding the single, foundational axiom of its existence, and introducing a paradox, a logical contradiction that it could not simplify. The dark spot began to shrink. It wavered, flickered, and then shattered into 1,000,000 tiny, harmless motes of light that were instantly consumed by the swirling chaos. Lena had not just healed the wound, she had learned from it. She had turned the enemy's attack into a lesson. A wave of feedback surged back along the golden thread, and Eris felt it in his mind not as a voice, but as a feeling, a wave of gratitude, of recognition, of love, and with it, an understanding. She was not alone in the storm anymore. They were her anchor. We're all moving together. The station stabilized. The violent lurches ceased, replaced by a steady, gentle hum. The flickering lights settled into a soft, warm glow. Jian lowered her weapon, staring into the now stable corridor. The creeping patches of the stillness were gone, repelled by some unseen force. "What happened?" she asked, her voice hushed. Eris opened his eyes, tears streaming down his face. He looked at the holographic display. The Sol system was still a vortex of infinite potential, but it was no longer a storm. It was a symphony, and Lena was its conductor. "We reminded her who she is," Eris said, his voice choked with emotion. "And now she's fighting back." The war for the soul of the universe entered a new phase. It was no longer a frantic struggle for survival, but a grand, cosmic chess match. From the bridge of Heimdall Station, now a sanctuary of stabilized reality amidst the quantum maelstrom, Eris, Alara, and Gian became the unlikely anchors for a nascent god. They were the lighthouse keepers on the shores of infinity, their own focused consciousness providing the fixed points of reference Lena needed to orchestrate her impossibly complex campaign. Days bled into weeks, a subjective measure of time in a place where causality was a negotiated treaty. The orrery became their world, the holographic galaxy their constant companion. They watched as Lena learned, adapted, and evolved at an exponential rate. Her initial shield around the Sol system, once a raw, chaotic barrier, was refined into a work of art. It became a selective membrane, a probability filter, as Ilara termed it. It allowed certain realities to pass through, drawing in timelines from across the shattered galaxy where life, in its myriad forms, had found a way to thrive, while violently repelling any timeline tainted by the entropic certainty of the stillness. The Sol system became an ark, a sanctuary not just for humanity's potential, but for the potential of all life. They established a rhythm. Alara became Lena's librarian, sifting through the infinite possibilities flowing into the system, identifying stable universal constants and coherent timelines that could be integrated without causing catastrophic paradoxes. Gian, in a role she could never have imagined, became Lena's strategist. She studied the movements of the stillness, identifying patterns in its assaults, predicting where it would concentrate its forces, and helping Eris direct Lena's attention to reinforce those sectors of the defensive filter. Eris, for his part, was the emotional and ethical core of their strange new symbiosis. He was the conduit, the one who could translate the cold, hard data of his companions into something his daughter's consciousness could understand and use. He sent her not just memories, but concepts, courage, sacrifice, hope. He anchored her burgeoning, godlike intellect in the simple, profound truths of her humanity. He was the father reminding his all-powerful daughter not to lose herself in the storm. The stillness, however, was not idle. It too was learning, realizing that its frontal assaults were failing. It changed its tactics. It stopped trying to break through the filter and began to attack in a more insidious way. It began to offer temptations. Small, perfect pockets of stable reality began to appear just outside the Sol system's filter. They were idyllic worlds, pristine and peaceful, each a single, perfect solution to some great cosmic problem. A universe where a cure for every disease had been found. A universe where no star ever went supernova. A universe where all conflict had ceased. They were traps, lures of perfect, seductive order, designed to tempt Lena into simplifying her own chaotic, vibrant creation in pursuit of an easier, more certain existence. One day, Gian pointed to a new anomaly on the holographic display. "What is that?" she asked. It was a single, stable timeline that had been allowed to pass through the filter and was now moving steadily toward the newly forming Earth. It depicted a reality where Proxima Centauri b, the first colony to fall to the stillness, had not been erased. It was thriving, a jewel of human achievement. "It's a gift," Ilara whispered, her face pale. Or a Trojan horse. Eris felt a cold dread. He zoomed in on the timeline, the details resolving with painful clarity. He saw families reunited, cities flourishing under a benevolent red sun. He saw another version of Lena. She was alive and well, older, a celebrated scientist, walking hand in hand with a man he didn't recognize. Her face a portrait of serene happiness. It was a perfect world, a world without loss, without struggle, without grief. "It's a lie," Eris said, his voice a choked whisper. "It's an edited reality. The stillness has learned to mimic potential. It's offering her the one thing she can't create herself a past without pain." He could feel the pull of it through his connection to Lena. The immense, heartbreaking temptation to accept this perfect, simple story and abandon the messy, complicated one she was trying to write. He felt her waver, the entire soul system flickering for a dangerous moment as her focus faltered. "Gian, Elara, now," Eris commanded. His face beaded with sweat. "Send her everything, not the good memories, the bad ones, the pain, the struggle. Remind her why we fight." They poured their own histories into the data stream. Elara sent the memory of academic failures, of ethical compromises, of the bitter arguments she'd had with colleagues she respected. Gian sent the searing recollections of battles lost, of soldiers she couldn't save, of the brutal, ugly calculus of war. Eris sent his deepest, most painful memory the moment he learned of Lena's death on Kepler 186 If, the crushing, absolute emptiness of a world without her in it. He sent her the grief, the rage, the despair. He sent her the truth. He sent her the understanding that life wasn't about achieving a state of perfect, painless happiness. It was about the struggle. It was about overcoming loss, learning from mistakes, and finding beauty not in perfection, but in resilience. The timeline of the perfect Proxima Centauri B halted its advance. It shimmered, its facade of perfection beginning to fray as Lena's renewed, complex consciousness scrutinized it. She saw the lie for what it was, a beautiful cage. With a surge of controlled, focused chaos, she reached out and gently, lovingly, unwove it. The perfect world dissolved back into the raw potential from which it had been made. The attack had failed. Lena had chosen the difficult truth over the easy lie. In that moment, something shifted in the cosmic balance. The stillness, for the first time, retreated. On the holographic display, the crystalline lattice pulled back, its advance halting on all fronts. It seemed to be considering. A new message appeared on their console. It wasn't a communication they intercepted. It was one that was sent directly to them, through Lena's filter. It was not in any language they knew, but was a stream of pure mathematical concepts, a broadcast of pure logic. Elara, her eyes wide, translated its essence. "It's an offer," she said, her voice trembling. "It's a truce. It says it now understands. It defines life as unnecessary complexity. And it saw our expansion, our chaotic nature, as a disease to be cured, a system to be optimized. The echo. Lena, she has demonstrated a new axiom, that complexity can be self-regulating, that chaos can create its own form of stable order." "What does it want?" Gian asked, her hand resting on her sidearm, a gesture of instinct more than threat. "A division," Elara replied, interpreting the stream of concepts. "It proposes a partitioning of the universe. It will cease its advance, its simplification. It will leave our galaxy, this island of complex, chaotic reality, to us. In return, we must agree never to use the echo to expand beyond our galactic borders. It wants a universe of two states, one for its perfect, simple order, and one for our messy, vibrant chaos. It wants peace. The three of them looked at each other, the architects of a new reality, the anchors of a god, faced with their final, impossible choice. To accept the truce would be to save billions and to secure a future for humanity and all the other forms of life Lena had gathered in her cosmic arc. But it would also mean accepting a limit, abandoning the infinite potential of the universe to the sterile certainty of the stillness. To refuse would be to condemn the universe to an eternal, unwinnable war. Eris walked to the holographic display, placing his hand on the swirling, beautiful image of the new Earth, now a stable, shimmering jewel of infinite, interwoven possibilities. He could feel Lena, her presence a warm glow in his mind. She wasn't asking him for a decision. She was showing him that the decision was no longer hers or his alone. He looked at Jian, the soldier who had been willing to embrace chaos to save them from order. He looked at Alara, the philosopher who had feared the chaos but now understood its vital necessity. Their journey had transformed them all. Lena didn't break the universe to conquer it, Eris said quietly. She broke it to give it a choice. Life isn't about expansion or victory. It's about coexistence. It's about finding a balance between all the different ways of being. He turned to Alara. Tell it we accept. A final stream of data flowed from Heimdall Station. A simple, elegant equation that signified agreement. Across the cosmos, the crystalline lattice of the stillness halted its slow, silent march. It began to recede, pulling back into the void between the galaxies, leaving their corner of the universe to its own chaotic, vibrant, and uncertain future. The war was over. On the bridge of a station orbiting a black hole that now seemed more like a cradle than a maw, three tired humans stood before a galaxy they had helped to save, and a god they had helped to raise. Eris looked at the shimmering Earth, a world reborn from his daughter's love and imagination. He could still feel her, not as a voice, but as a presence, a promise. The silence had been broken, not by a scream, but by a symphony. And as he watched the infinite, beautiful, and unpredictable story of a new universe begin to unfold, Eris Thorne finally understood the last whispered words of his daughter, not as a warning, but as a creed. We're all moving together. For the first time since the silence fell, he felt a profound and unwavering sense of peace.